Welcome to a new episode of the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists around the world so that we can think, reflect, learn, and be inspired together. My name is Shreya, and this is the Animal Liberation Hour. This podcast is brought to you by Animal Activism Mentorship. AAM's mission is to grow and strengthen the animal rights movement by providing a space for activists to have access to a community and various educational resources. From one-on-one mentorship to free workshops and trainings to this podcast, AAM aims to empower humans to take action for the animals so that we can create a kind, just, and equitable world for all creatures. For more information, visit animalactivismmentorship.com or our link tree, which you can find in the show notes. There, you can sign up for a free mentor, keep up with all things AAM, and donate so that we can continue this important work for the animals. It is an immense honor to be able to chat with our guest today. I am really thrilled to introduce the one and only Dr. Faraz Harsini. Dr. Harsini has advocated for animal rights for over 10 years. He is the founder and CEO of his nonprofit organization, Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, or ASAP. ASAP supports students interested in advocating for animal protection and pursuing careers in various fields where they can make an impactful change in the lives of animals. He is also a biomedical scientist and works as a bioprocessing senior scientist at the Good Food Institute. His work centers advancing scientific and technological methods to produce animal-free proteins on a large scale. Dr. Harsini believes that the root cause of many problems that impact humans and animals are centered in the food system, and his work in GFI is geared towards changing just that. In this conversation, we will hear about Dr. Harsini's story, what inspires his activism, his theory of change, his many involvements in the animal rights movement, and also the vision for ASAP in preparing future leaders in the animal protection movement. So without any further ado, I bring you the intelligent and inspiring Dr. Faraz Harsini. Welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
My pleasure. I love the name, Animal Liberation.
Yes, I know. That's what we're all here for. We love to share stories of people who are using their own unique skills, their creativity, and their personal stories to go out there and fight the good fight for animal liberation. And I had the honor of hearing you speak at the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit, and you're such an engaging speaker. You got us to laugh. You got us to really engage. Like, we were feeling all the feels while you were speaking. And I so appreciated that. And I was delighted to hear that you're also part of the mentor community at AAM. And so we figured who better to chat with than the one who does it all. So yeah, it's an honor to chat with you. So let's start at the very beginning. You growing up, your story, where where you've come from, and what inspired your entry into animal rights and veganism and activism, of course.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Iran. I'm from Tehran originally, the capital. So if I spoke Farsi, I won't have accent. Yeah, I did my undergrad there in chemical engineering, and I always consider the period I spent in college as like when I actually reached the age of reason, because before that I was like, we have a very tough exam in order to get into university. So I was just very much busy with that. But after getting into college, I started seeing the world for how it was and getting involved in some political activities, noticing a lot of oppression, a lot of injustice. And I think I always cared about animals even back then, before being vegetarian or vegan. I was against hunting. I remember even my bachelor thesis was dedicated to animals used in the lab, despite the fact that my thesis didn't have anything to do with animals used in the lab. But somehow I just thought that I just need to dedicate my thesis to them for their sacrifice. So I always felt bad for them, but I guess I also wasn't vegan, so I wasn't really thinking that they're not sacrificing their lives, it's us abusing them. But it just shows that even before going vegan, I still felt bad for these animals. Um, and yeah, throughout college, I also got involved in human advocacy for human rights and different forms of injustice, I remember. And that's combined with the fact that vegetarianism and veganism are not really a thing in Iran. So I never heard of people who would never eat dairy and egg. That's just never heard of it. I think now I know a group, but I don't know if it's because I'm already vegan and I, got attracted to like-minded people, or, they didn't exist back then. Now they do exist. I'm not sure which one it is, but so I never came across the idea of veganism, and vegetarianism even is viewed as some new thing that people do for health, nothing about animal rights at all. And it was until I left Iran, I was living in Germany for a while, and one of my friends told me, Faraz, you can't say you love animals and eat them too. It's very ironic because I was actually trying to design a poster to encourage Iranians not to buy goldfish. That's for Persian New Year, for Nowruz, there is a tradition where people buy live goldfish for the table, and they keep them in water tanks. Right. Ironically, it's supposed to be a symbol of life and wealth and health and all that. Which is ironic because the fish is pretty much enslaved and imprisoned, but it's supposed to be a symbol of freedom and life. Yeah. But throughout this process, millions of fish die, and I always encourage people. I'm also a musician, and so at the end of every concert that I had, I always encourage Iranians not to buy goldfish. And I was asking my friend for her help to build this graphic design, and she said, you make no sense. You literally eat fish. You literally eat animals. Here you're trying to save goldfish. Doesn't make any sense. So I was a little upset.
Was
but
this
after
friend
3 months,
vegan or vegetarian?
It was vegetarian, yeah.
Okay.
So, which is good and bad, because I'm glad that she was the only person that by that time pushed me. But at the same time, vegetarians generally don't push enough. I think if somebody who I am today, if that person came to me and said, grabbed me and slapped me and said, hey, wake up, what are you doing? This is what's happening with eggs. This is what's happening with dairy. This is what happens to animals. I think I would have changed really quickly, but no one really said, here are a bunch of documentaries. Let me answer your questions. I remember I loved meat so much that I said it's impossible for me to even go vegetarian. And I remember saying, I'm ashamed of myself for ever saying that, but I remember saying that, sorry, animals, it's just 1 second of you dying, and I just love meat so much. And today I know, first of all, it's not 1 second. It's literally they're enslaved and imprisoned, and they're suffering the entire time from the moment they're born. Right. And second, it's not a matter of whether it's 1 second or not. My pleasure never comes before somebody's life, which is funny because someone said on Twitter once that, don't worry, I get my meat from somewhere where animals have one bad day, only one bad day. And I was like, how auspicious is that is to think that way? Because to me, a bad day is like when I get a flat tire. You know, how easy it is to just say, oh, they have just one bad day. Their bad day is like having their heads chopped off. It just says how we are looking down upon these animals. And just imagine if somebody loses their dog and you go to them and you're like, oh, no worry, you gave them a good life. They just had one bad day. And I'm pretty sure they're going to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
But when it comes to farm animals, that's okay. So I'm glad that that was a start for me to do this transition, go from a person who never thought would become even a vegetarian to today knowing that not only this is the best thing that I can be doing with my life in terms of the amount of suffering that is involved, but also it's the root cause of other forms of oppression that I always cared about, such as human rights, just because really at its core, we are looking at another group when we are saying that because of our differences, we focus on our differences. We say, you have a different color, you have a different sexual orientation, you have a different species, your IQ is different, whatever. We use that as a reason to oppress the other group. And because of that, I think we would never reach a peaceful and just world as long as we are oppressing animals, because we are literally doing the same thing to them.
Yeah, that's very, very beautifully said. And so that's fascinating that one comment from a friend of yours. You raised your defenses. You got upset about it, but that got you to really explore what that meant, and because you wanted to live in alignment with what you believe. And no one wants to be called a hypocrite, right? So yeah. And so eventually, how did that evolve into you doing activism? And because often when we think about animal rights activism, we don't necessarily, and I think we're getting better about this now, of like bringing in other cultures and folks from other communities to speak on their experiences and not being, the savior from the outside. So what had your process been, given that, we weren't exposed as someone who's come from Iran, and within your culture, the consumption of animals was normalized. And so how was it a struggle to just wrap your cultural identity with your activism?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I do have any cultural identity. I think I always look at things as what they are and try to see if that fits my framework for morality or things that I need to be interested or be working on. So I don't think it went necessarily against my cultural identity, because I see culture and tradition as a set of things that we inherent, and often we don't really think about what's helpful, what's not. And I personally don't find a lot of value in that, and I don't consider myself a traditional person. It was more like a habit for me, but I know that breaking habits is always difficult. But I do acknowledge that a lot of people do have that cultural identity behind it. But it's actually really funny, because many of these cultural identities actually go back to respecting animals and not harming them if you dig enough. Something that was very interesting for me, I've been doing animal rights advocacy for like 10 years, and I just never knew this until I attended a course in Harvard. I was teaching a class on food transformation, but I stayed there to attend the next session with another lecturer myself. And she's from India, and she was basically saying how dairy became a thing in Indian culture, where now Indians think it's their culture, and she literally was talking about how it actually got introduced through British folks who were in India, and then they just wanted milk with their tea, and how it went from that to becoming such a cultural thing that today when you ask Indians, they associate dairy with Indian culture, but it's actually British culture that forced introduced it to Indian culture. So it's funny how that works, how even when we a lot of times associate certain things, look at the root of a lot of these, and they're actually extremely racist. And if you go back to their origin, you see that a lot of these origin diets were heavily based on like plants and etc. Or if there was any hunting or any animal involved, that was the necessity of their time. Not it's not like they had supermarkets back then. Yeah. So it's also important to understand first that a lot of these cultural identities don't really go back to abusing animals. And second, even if they did, that doesn't mean, of course, as we all know, that doesn't justify doing that today.
Correct. Yeah.
I just say that I think, I can't remember which philosopher said that, but he said basically when we inherit tradition, it's like when we are born or from society, it's like we are given a basket full of good apples and bad apples. These are different things that our parents teach us, the society teaches us. And it's our job to literally dump the basket, dump all these apples, and pick the ones that are good and put them back in the basket. I think we grow up with a set of cultural and traditional thoughts. You know, it can relate to religion, politics, animal consumption, our viewpoint in so many different things. And we don't even notice that a lot of these don't come from us. It's just things that society or parents taught us. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and it's our responsibility to examine each apple and decide what's good and keep those and get rid of the rest of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else to say to that. Then I agree. And you mentioned, family and parents. So just out of curiosity, what was that experience like with you and your family, and how receptive or not receptive were they to, you're very dedicated to this cause, and your way of life, what you're eating, what you're wearing is also changed. So how did that impact your relationship with your friends and family?
I think by the time that I went vegan, I was both emotionally and financially independent from my parents. So I had the luxury of saying that this is what I want to do with my life, and it's nobody's business. I know that this is the best thing I can do with my life, and I don't really care what other people think, including my parents. But thankfully, they were still supportive, and we had a lot of discussions about it. None of them was too much against it, and actually they're trying to follow my steps as well. But again, this is something that I know is challenging for a lot of people, especially when they're living with their family. I mean, my mom is back in Iran. I can't even go back, even if I wanted to. But again, I think because this podcast is really not about me, it's about what other people can do. So for people who are living with their family and they find it challenging, I always say there are different ways to approach. And with family, it's always more difficult because you have that emotional connection and you have this whole thing going on that parents typically don't want to be the one who are learning from their children, because it's generally supposed to be the other way around. So it takes very open-minded kind of family members to be able to learn from their children and undo some of their old thinking. But, I encourage people to use anything in their power. One of my friends, he went back and he said he's Indian, and he told his dad that, I'm going to move out unless you just, make the household vegan. And he knew that if he plays that card, his dad would rather just go vegan than just like losing him, right? So use anything in your power. It can be that, it can be different ways. And at the end of the day, there are some people who can't, and especially if they're minors, they don't have that much control. And it's all about doing the right thing as soon as you can. I know that a lot of people, as soon as they become independent, do that. But at the same time, I also know that a lot of people, even if they're 4-year-old, have the power to change their family. I've seen multiple cases where a kid refused to have animal products, and like a 4-year-old, seriously, and they changed their family. So their parents had to change. Or I was doing a Cube of Truth in Germany, and a group of, I think, high school kids stopped by. We were talking, and they said, everything that you are saying is right, except that we are living with our parents. We can't do anything. I was like, don't tell me that if you go home and you told your dad that you just don't want to have dairy anymore, you just want oat milk or almond milk, he's just going to say no. He said, yeah, you're right. Right. So we have that power and that influence. It's just like a matter of how we want to play our cards. And all I also encourage people to consider is, if you look at this as a form of injustice, there is no way. It's really difficult to justify doing that, by saying that, oh yeah, I guess my family is a little like racist, so I guess as long as I'm with them, I'm just gonna, be racist, just because it's really hard to change them, right? But you would go out of your way to fight that. You're gonna, even if you can't really change your parents, there is no way that when you go back home for holidays, you would like contribute to racist slurs just because your parents are doing that, right? You're gonna, as it's famous in the US, all these fights during Thanksgiving just because people don't eat, right?
Yeah.
So veganism shouldn't be any different.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think you touched on that point, that incident with the students in Germany with the cube, and I think that also does have we internalize a sense of powerlessness, or we internalize hierarchical structures in society that, oh, I'm like lower in this ladder, and the professor or the parent or the teacher or whomever is, or like a corporate executive, like they are there for a reason, and I don't have the ability to change that. And I think in just reframing it as, they're not going to say no if you say, hey, can I have this instead? And I heard Genesis Butler, who we all know and love and adore and admire, saying on another podcast that, similarly to for younger folks who are still under the care of their parents, and when advocating for living a plant-based lifestyle at home or embracing a vegan way of life, if the argument is, this is for the future of the planet, so I have a planet to live on, any parent who loves their kid isn't going to say no, we don't want you to have a planet to live on. So it's like what you said, it's about knowing the facts, playing your cards right, and that you are correct. We all know that what's happening to animals is a huge injustice. And when you're true to that and view it as a social justice cause, then there is really no way to argue otherwise. So since then, where has your career taken you? Like, what are you up to these days?
So a couple of years ago, I just couldn't really do what I was doing, despite the fact that it was something that I really enjoyed, which was working in labs, working on drug discovery for new therapeutics for diseases.
Did any of that work involve animal experimentation?
Yes, I didn't do that, but I guess downstream of what I was working on, the company had to do animal testing. In fact, the company didn't want to, but if there were FDA mandatory animal testing in place. And some of that was, of course, just for exploration, which was, I mean, everybody knew that I was against it and I never did it. But it was very tough to just sit in all these meetings and learning about it. And anyway, but really working on so many diseases like cancer, inflammatory diseases, pandemics, and just knowing that at the end of the day, they all come back to our food system. That was one thing. And then the other thing was knowing that how many animals are suffering. And even if I just thought about the numbers, because I always ask myself, like, what is the biggest thing that I can do with my life? Like where I can have the most impact. And that's how I always like decided what I want to work on. At some point, the biggest thing in my life was cancer, and that's why I wanted to do cancer research. And really, any way you look at this, it comes down to like animal consumption, whether it's the amount of suffering, whether it's like what's causing global malnutrition, what's causing pandemics, antibiotic resistance, climate change. You pick a topic, it comes down to animal consumption, unfortunately. So, which means why it's so important for all of us to be working on this from different angle. So a while ago, I just decided to quit that job, despite the fact that it was a very, the pay was good, everything was good, but I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So I started working as a scientist at Good Food Institute, working on alternative proteins, but at the same time, I started my own nonprofit, Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, because I also realized that our movement is completely failing in universities where there is a ton of talent.
Yeah.
And I think we are also, as a movement, we are wasting a lot of money and time and energy trying to change the system where people in charge do not give a shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't care. But we are trying to make like really small changes by trying to work with them. And I want to invest in the future generation where the future leaders do have vegan values. And like any other cultural change, a lot of times this starts with intellectuals. It comes from universities. And that's where our movement is completely failing. There is no coherent, organized way to do animal advocacy in universities. And just to give you an example, if you go to any university, there is always a Christian organization, like a national group that has chapters in every university. They're doing the exact same thing. They have funding. They're always doing outreach. There is a similar group in law school. It's called the Federalist Society. It's a conservative group, but they have been so effective that today 6 out of 9 justices are affiliated with Federalist Society, and all they do is student activities, right? But they just do it right. So this just shows you how much power there is in universities. And if we, just organize the movement, if we train these vegans to find their voice, if we bring this education to universities, if we train the future physicians, that even if they don't become vegan, they understand that veganism is helpful and a good way to prevent a lot of diseases. That's a lot by itself, right? So making new vegans, organizing vegans, making sure that everyone is doing the exact same thing in a very orchestrated manner. I think that's what's missing. At the same time, there is a lot of potential. All these people, all these future scientists, politicians, lawyers, activists, they come from universities a lot of times, and we want to invest in that and fix that with allied scholars.
That is brilliant. And in hindsight, I see what you're saying in terms of university presence, because back in my undergrad days, it was, there's like one animal rights kind of group, and there are like maybe 2 or 3 people in it. And I was also like, oh, I don't want to, I was always worried about being perceived as that quote unquote annoying, preachy vegan. So I was just minding my own business. But yeah, and then we see, there are these nationwide fraternities and sororities, and they're just recruiting and doing what they do. And yeah, being able to have that for folks in the animal advocacy space is really important, because these are the people who are going to, like you said, end up being doctors and lawyers and engineers and scientists. And each of these avenues impact animals, like even through medical training, the use of animals in medical training, let alone the food and the health aspect of it. The science, you and I know that animals are just experimented on. Almost every species of animals are being experimented on. And um, engineering, like if it comes to like even like building design such that it's safe for other creatures, making sure that birds don't run into buildings, like being very mindful and cautious of all of these elements. Animal law, like advancing where these living beings stand in the eyes of the law, like all of these, it would be a significant shift, because college is where a lot of that does happen. And it's really inspiring to hear the prospects that allied scholars for animal protection can have. So what is your presence like now? How young is the organization?
We've been doing this kind of work for a couple of years, but we weren't really established as a nonprofit, which is actually how it started, because I was going personally with my friends to universities and offering help to different organizations, animal rights organizations in universities. But we noticed that everyone is doing a different thing, and it's really hard to organize it if everyone is doing a different thing. So that's why we studied the movement, made a list of all active student organizations, understood what works, what doesn't, and started ASAP in 2022. So that's when we were officially registered and got our tax exempt status. And it's very exciting, because this coming semester, this next fall, we're going to be expanding to Harvard, MIT, Columbia, Texas A&M, in addition to Texas Tech and UT Austin. And these are like some of the biggest universities in Texas.
Yeah.
And University of Wisconsin in Madison. So just think about
a great location, because all of the primate labs and the campaigns against them, like that would be an amazing hub.
And the way I look at this is like, when you look at the student body or student population in universities, there must be sometimes like thousands of students. Like UT Austin has 66,000 students. So that means that even if 1% or 1.5% was vegan or veg friendly, you would have 1,000 folks walking around interested in your cause. But just average number of people who attend any club, if they are active at all, is like 5 or 3, like you mentioned, right? So that means that we are failing to be on campus, to reach out. So we want to fix that. We want to bring a lot of education and work with dining halls at the same time to go plant-based, and just change universities from within, and then also train future leaders that after they graduate, they can actually change the system in a bigger picture. So it's like a long-term investment, but at the in short time, we literally changed a lot of lives, a lot of students. But in long term, we really want to change the system with this momentum that we're building in universities. I mean, just think about all these students from universities that I just mentioned who are going to have very impactful jobs, right? And then just think about even one person who is vegan in the right position, like Cory Booker, like Eric Adams. Just imagine how much influence these people had just because they believe in the cause. So we want more of that.
Yeah, we all do love Cory Booker. Yes, so that's I love that, the growth that's happening. And getting more students to participate. So are you envisioning ASAP chapters? Is that what it's going to look like? Got it.
Exactly. We're going to have ASAP as registered student organization in each university. And one of our goals is to make sure that these chapters are sustainable. So it's not that you get 2 or 3 students doing something for a couple of years, they graduate and everything dies down, and then you have to do the entire thing again. We want to make sure it's sustainable and it grows year by year. Yeah. But yes, having a registered student organization also helps us to bring other groups that want to do something on campus. They need permission, they need a sponsor, and typically there is no other active group. But we want to really make sure that we are in top 100 universities. And exciting news is I'm actually going to be talking to some students from India. IIT. So
yeah, heard that's like the leading institution there.
Yeah. So they were also interested in ASAP. I was planning on going international down the road after 4 or 5 years, but I think that's a great opportunity. I really want to help them, given the potential in India as well.
Mm-hmm. Very much so, very much so. And so if students listening want to establish a chapter at their university, how can they go about that?
Yeah, they can contact us, typically if they're serious and really want to change the culture and get things done. If they contact me, we'll meet with them. We have a very good system how to go about it. We'll help them. And the role of ASAP here is we want to make it super easy for students. So we know they have finals, they have breaks, they get busy with coursework. So we want to make sure that we take care of all the hard work for them. They just get to do whatever needs to be done locally. And even when we have outreach, we try to bring our own team on the ground to help them in person. But yeah, the process starts by contacting us, and they can check out our website, which is alliedscholars.org, and they can contact us through that.
Yeah, we'll include all of that information in the show notes, so people can definitely be sent your way if they feel inspired. And, or, if you know of an animal advocate in any university who could benefit from this would be a great resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, we're, of course, animal activism mentorship, and we like to talk about mentors. So any mentors in your life who've inspired you?
I think Paul Bashir and Anonymous for the Voiceless in general was very eye-opening for me in the way that it really changed the way that I was doing outreach. And I think it really changed the way that I'm doing outreach 180 degrees. It became so much more effective. Just AV's method, I know that he also borrows that from Gary Yourofsky and other leaders of the movement. But the way that I look at veganism as a form of injustice, and I examine my strategy that whether I would do that for any other form of injustice, all these visions, it all comes from AV for me, which was really good.
I wonder how you would advise activists who are, either starting their own organizations or are exploring joining organizations to make sure that they're finding the right community for them, because we can't be effective in our advocacy if we don't feel safe in our own communities. And sometimes, this is what makes the animal advocacy space as it is now very unique, is that those who are doing the activism, those who are organizing and protesting, are not the actual beings who are being oppressed. Yes, they are agents of their own liberation, which is something that I deeply believe in. But the organization, the showing up, the advocacy, the education, for the most part, it's us humans who are doing it, and we're not the ones who are the actual people being oppressed in the case of the animal rights space. So that would call for people of different ideologies and beliefs in the human rights and human injustices that are prevalent in the world to show up in these spaces. And so we are meeting different people. And so the chances of having clashes in beliefs is pretty high. So how would you advise the movement navigate that effectively and because it is a fine line to draw. It's like, okay, where do you draw the line of what beliefs are acceptable and what beliefs aren't to be a part of a community? I know it's a very hard one.
I guess something that really helps me personally is to clarify why I do what I do. And I think if the answer for that is clear and the goal is clear, I think the means to get there become a lot more clearer. So what I mean by that is the way I process information is that I have a set of skills, and then and the goal is animal liberation, and there are different ways to do that. And if I decide that one way is particularly good and it deserves my attention and basically dedication, then a lot of things become not necessarily relevant as long as the path is taking us to animal liberation. One thing that becomes a little less relevant for me is the way that I personally feel about what's happening. Because if my goal, I guess, okay, I'm going to be a little more direct. So are we doing activism for ourselves to feel better, or are we doing activism for animals? Mm-hmm. So I think some groups are very clear that this is a circle that we come together, we put our differences aside, we put our clashes aside, socializing. So a lot of people just really want to socialize. So that's a challenge that we have to deal with, because vegans are isolated a lot of times. They want friends. So a lot of times they joined activist groups to find friends and like-minded people, which is fine. But this should be something that we have to think about, right? Should we have some events that are just for socializing, for people to get together, have friends, or is this like an event where we were just coming together for animals, right? We have the same goal and we want to just fight for animals. And I think for me personally, when my goal is very clear that I'm not here because of my own feelings, I'm not here to find friends, I'm not here to find dates, I'm here for animals, it becomes a lot easier to get along with people and understand where they're coming from. And in fact, build a safe environment where people with different points of view can come together and unite for one mission, for animals. Because let's be honest, we can be hurt, our feelings can be hurt by pretty much anything, and it varies from person to person. But if you compare any of them, take the worst one of this scenario with people and put it with best case scenario of what animals go through, and their best case is still worse than our worst case, right? So how dare we saying that, oh, my feeling is hurt because this person is like that, versus just knowing that what animals are going through. Now, that's not to say that everything is allowed and we should, like I said, I think that the framework should be having a safe space where everyone is welcome, everyone is respectful, no one is disrespecting and limiting someone else's freedom. But beyond that, I think having that goal, and it's just, it goes beyond politics, it goes beyond, I even say that to me, I'm an introvert. Like, just by nature, I don't want to do activism, I don't want to do outreach. And one of the groups that I'm most active with is Anonymous for the Voiceless, that does outreach, right? So by nature, I'm uncomfortable, but every time that I do it, every time I put my values, my goal ahead of my own personal petty pleasure, oh, I'm too tired, I want to stay in bed, I don't want to move, I don't want to talk to people. Every time I put my values higher, I say that I'm going there because of animals. And when I have good conversations, when I make someone vegan and I know that it's gonna snowball. That person is gonna make future vegans. All of that makes me getting over my feelings and just going and doing something worth it. And I always say that it's not directly what you were asking, but I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of people also don't want to go to certain groups because they think they lack certain skills. So I want to really bring this, like, change the equation here, that it's not about us, it's not about our skills, it's not about what we want to do, it's about what needs to be done. So when you have the answer, when you know that this is what needs to be done, what you want to do is kind of irrelevant. So I personally, like I said, I'm introvert, and English is not even my first language. So by nature, an extrovert or someone who speaks English more fluently than I do has better chance than me in like doing this. But the only reason I get over my feelings, like go out of my comfort zone, is because I know that it's effective, and somebody has to do it, and not many people are doing it. And so it's important for me to get out of my comfort zone and do this. Yeah. And the last thing I add is that a lot of times people may not feel comfortable doing certain tasks because they may think that they lack balance. And I want to say that a lot of it comes with practice. And I never thought of myself as someone who would be good at doing outreach. And you see Earthling ads, you see other people, and you're like, oh my God, I just don't know that much. Yeah. You don't have to know all the stats. You don't have to know everything. All you have to realize is that eating animals is wrong. And I think AV actually in particular has made outreach really accessible for people who just don't know everything that Earthling does, right? So I guess the bottom line here is just don't be worried. If you think that there is something that needs to be done, go ahead and do it, even if it's uncomfortable, because we can only get things done when we are outside of our comfort zone. And that's something that I constantly push myself.
That's how we learn, and that's how you grow. So if you feel like you don't have the set of skills, you're going to learn them. So yeah, that's having a growth mindset. And it's easier said than done. You can just say, but yeah, I feel called to ask you, how do you avoid burnout? How do you take care of yourself? Because I think that's also important for us to acknowledge, that we allow ourselves, let alone others in the community, that permission to say, okay, this is too much, and how to frame it as, I'm not being selfish, I'm not minimizing the issue that and the horrific injustices that the animals are enduring, but I also can't be effective for them if I'm burnt out. And so what do you do to take care of yourself, and what advice do you have for people who have that we're all here because we really care about this issue? And there can be times where it's like, and I've personally felt this, like when it gets really cold and it's snowing. I live in Chicago, and we're like outside, and I get cold very easily, and then I can feel it in my bones, like my knees hurt. And in that moment, I'm like, the animals have it worse. The animals have it worse. And then I get to my car, and I can't physically, it takes me a while to be able to physically move. And I do have bone issues. So at that point, I'm like, is this something that, like, is it like, should I think about this more? When is it appropriate for me to put my physical functional self on the line and, navigate, like, yeah, how do you weigh the balances there?
I think to maximize our impact, it's important for us to be healthy and functional. So if we are broken, and then animals just lose another activist. Yeah. So we have to make sure that we don't put ourselves in danger. But I also think that a lot of burnout for me, at least in the past, I had burnout I think two reasons for that were, one, not having a good supportive community. And by supportive community, I don't mean like 50 people. I mean like literally one good friend that you can like know that they're always there for you. Someone who's like-minded, who encourages your ideas, someone like that. So having that really helps. I guess actually I had a third one. So the second one would be actually what you do for the living. I think I found throughout my doctorate, when I worked in an environment where people were just constantly doing animal testing, I knew that they knew everything about veganism, and these are like all PhDs, MDs, postdocs, and they would still not go vegan. That fact really always bothered me.
Yeah.
It's just like being around people, because on the street, like I can give people the benefit of the doubt that they just don't know if I talk to them. But like when people around you, your roommates, your colleagues, they know everything there is to know. You know they can afford it. You know they can just easily make a decision, and they still don't. That just, it's
so frustrating.
I think, especially if the work is not really directly giving you a skill that you can later on apply for animal advocacy, changing that environment really helps someone's mental health. And the third one is having actually like effective outreach, because I learned that one of the reasons that I was burning out was just not being effective in my outreach. And it's very interesting because like in the past, when someone told me going vegan is very hard, I would say, I would literally spend 2 hours talking about, oh, there is Beyond Meat, there's vegan cheese, and they're like, oh, I tried vegan cheese, it sucks. And then, so the reason that it caused burnout is because the whole time I'm thinking about animals. In fact, throughout AV, like I'm literally looking at this screen with animals being chopped up alive, and then this person is talking about vegan cheese doesn't taste good. And right, so looking at this, but saying a different word, thinking about animals, but like talking about vegan cheese is partially my fault. If people know the why, the how becomes easy. So I'm not there to show them how. Of course, if they're genuine, if they really ask me, so what do you guys eat? I would tell them, but I'm not going to spend 2 hours convincing someone that going vegan is not difficult, because the focus should be the why. And what's the understanding. So all I say today to that today is, do you think it's harder for you to be vegan, or do you think it's harder for that animal? And I haven't had a single person who trolled that question.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. That is a relief to hear, actually.
So we can talk about vegan cheese for 2 hours here. And then the fact that to me, it's an ethical standpoint, but to this bystander, it's not yet.
Yes.
So me thinking about animals, but like talking about vegan cheese, that's like why I'm getting so angry inside. That's why I have this fire inside that is killing me, because I'm not even saying what I mean, what I'm thinking. But it turns out if you actually say the words that you're thinking, not only it actually works better, but also you don't feel like you're burning inside, because you know that you're there for animals. And in my experience, not only it works so much better, and people actually respect you more because they know that you're being honest, you are saying, you're not pandering, you're not trying to appeal to them, you're there for animals, they actually respect you more. So there's that, and then internally you're not burning because you know that you're saying the right word. In fact, I just say this, even if the person doesn't change and they end up not changing and just like leaving and walking away, you still have this good feeling that you said the right words. Doing effective outreach not only prevents burnout, but also when you see the impact when people change, that's the best thing that you can ask for. And it just gets all that tiredness and burnout and everything out of you.
That is such a good point, because sometimes we immediately want to go into fixing all of everybody's food preferences. Like, okay, let me come up with all of the brands that will cater to every single plant-based version of whatever animal product they're eating. Because like you said, they're still at that level of not seeing this as an ethical thing, as an ethical concept. So just being, and I think that is also a very unique thing for within the animal rights movement, because the use and abuse and exploitation of these creatures permeates everything in society. And so people are just quick to think of like, oh, but like what am I going to do for this fancy belt or this handbag or this coat? And you're not thinking about what, but like by showing them like, hey, this is what's happening, in good conscience, can you not say that, oh, I would much rather have my scrambled egg or piece of pig flesh over, what they're having to endure, for sure. And I feel like we must talk about your viral moment with the Selena Gomez tweet. So, yeah, let's chat about that. And I really loved how thoughtful your response was, as you were so kind and compassionate and respectful in your tweet, which we'll talk about further. And also how you pointed out that some of the negative comments that you received did affect you, but you addressed each point that people were rebutting your post with. And so, yeah, I just wanted to talk about your experience, what the post was, what you said, and why you felt driven to speak up, like in that capacity.
Yeah, I think there are a few lessons from that for all of us. One is you notice that people get hurt even when you're super respectful. So for those who haven't seen the tweet, it's so Selena Gomez posted a picture of herself with like a dead fish that she caught with another girl. I don't know if that's her daughter. I actually didn't know who Selena Gomez was. That's how disconnected I am from like mainstream. Like,
I think that was her little sister. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I have no idea who she was until I actually saw the picture, and I was like, my friends was like, "This is Selena Gomez." I was like, "Huh?" And then I looked her up. So yeah, that's how bad I am. But anyways.
Oh my God, that's like the best thing I've heard.
Then when I noticed that she's like a celebrity and whatever,
and it's known for being so kind and so compassionate. She's always known as like a very, very kind, down to earth person. So yeah.
So the tweet that I wrote was very well written. It was very respectful, but you see that still triggers non-vegans. Sure. It still triggers. So just know that when people like tell you that vegans should shut up, should not speak up, shouldn't be rude, it's not really about what you say. You can be as respectful as you want, but they still perceive that as a personal attack. Yeah. And what I always say is vegans are like a mirror that reflect inconsistencies between non-vegans' actions and values. They say, oh, animals, we respect animals, but then you show them that they're getting pleasure out of killing an animal. And then they don't like to hear that. And that's okay. I mean, nobody wants to change if they're not uncomfortable. So what I'm trying to say is that don't be quiet because you're worried about somebody getting offended, because people will find a reason to get offended first. And second, that's like such a carnist point of view that you are making us uncomfortable, so please shut up. Yeah. And always have to ask yourself, if you were in place of animals, what would they want you to do? Would they want you to be the rude vegan? Not rude. What word did you say? Like annoying vegan who always like speaks up and doesn't shut up?
The preachy vegan. Yeah. Preachy? Yeah.
They call us preachy, they call us angry, but it's funny. It's ironic because you tweet about like be kind to animals and you just see how many people are triggered by that and just get angry.
Yeah.
So notice that these are not specific about vegans. There is a whole push on us not to speak up, which is why it's so important for us to speak up. And the other lesson is that I didn't know that the tweet would go viral, right? The only reason that I had to do it. It was like someone has to say something.
Yeah.
And just know that you have that power. Like if we don't speak up, if I was like, who is gonna read that?
Yeah.
Then the tweet never had a chance to reach to like 1 million people, right? And just so it's that. So just know that, take that mentality and apply it to your life. Like every time you go to a vegan restaurant, write them a nice review. If you go to a vegetarian restaurant, write them a medical review. Say, I would have given you 5 stars if you were fully vegan, and I will come back if you add your vegan options. If you go to a non-vegan restaurant, always complain about lack of vegan options. Say, I came here with a group of vegans. Now I'm very disappointed. We are not going to come back, but we will support you if you add more options. So respectful at the same time, just say something. Just imagine if every vegan, we complain a lot. We always like,
oh yeah.
But imagine if every time that we complained, we actually did something. And there are millions of vegans, right? Imagine if every vegan who went to a non-vegan restaurant actually bothered to write a review. I can guarantee you we would have been like, I don't know, 80% ahead of where we are today if vegans actually complained and did something. Like very simple steps, right?
Yeah, so that's a very simple, doable step. And you don't have to like go in being all obnoxious and like, you don't do this, or just say that, look, like, I want to enjoy the same experience that others are having, and without products that involve using animals. And there are so many amazing products out there. I'm happy to even sometimes, folks suggest like just bringing samples, like, hey, like this is, I'm happy to bring you some samples of plant-based cheeses that you can try. And yeah, like chefs like to get creative sometimes, and maybe they'll be receptive. There's always something that you can do in a very respectful capacity. And I would say that your tweet was very respectful, that I hope you extend your kindness and compassion towards animals like fish you're holding, suffered. And then everyone was like, you don't know what she's gone through. Like, she's gone through so much, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, and the way you responded to that is that, well, for starters, you didn't know who she was, which is really funny. And also that, like, you're not denying that what she's experienced, that she, I'm sure everyone experiences hardships, but that does not mean that we can go out of our way to exploit another being. And it's shifting that mindset of viewing what she was doing as exploiting another being, because we're just so trained to think of that as a hobby. You go fishing, but when you actually think of it, it's a torturous experience for them, and people don't want to know or hear that. So
absolutely, I always say, just like, read all those comments. Imagine if she drowned a dog. She's like, you don't know what she's going through now. She just drowned a dog. Like, laughable, right?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Or she has lupus, therefore she drowned a dog. That's okay somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like, well, yeah, we're not saying that it's, we're respecting the fact that she has a platform, and she is known for being such a kind person, and to extend that. So if anyone wants to go viral on social media, just, you know what to do. There's plenty of celebrities out there. So yeah, I want to be respectful of your time, and you've given us so many great insights and such an inspiring conversation. And I personally like to wrap up with a question that is very futuristic. So what does your vision for a just and equitable vegan world look like to you? So how would we all be living? How would the animals be living? Like, what does that society look like? I've gotten a lot of interesting answers, so want to hear.
Where are all these cows gonna go, right?
I know. Where are we gonna put them?
Plants are gonna take over the world.
I know, yeah.
Well, I guess my vision for the world is a vegan world, and the question is not so much when we get there. The question for me is like, no matter when and if we get there, the question for me is like, what am I doing with my life? And am I working towards that goal? Because that's the only thing that I'll be asking myself when I'm dying, that I'm not gonna regret having like a lower salary or higher salary. I'm not gonna regret any relationships. For me personally, I'm gonna regret knowing that I could do better to save animals and I didn't. I just don't want to be in that position. So to me, it's just, I'm going to avoid your question altogether and say that instead of like where we're going to be and what that world looks like, I think it's like, what can I do today to make sure we get there? Am I doing everything in my capacity to make sure that we get to that world? And I think I'm very, very much excited. I know that a lot of changes start from universities, and I'm very like wholeheartedly excited about what I do with ASAP, because I know that it's one of the biggest gaps in our movements that no one is addressing, and it's a long-term investment. But I really believe in it, and every time I talk about it, everyone also agrees with me. But I know that a lot of time, it's actually very difficult for me because a lot of grants that I apply for, I get rejected because it's not necessarily welfareism. Animal liberation is not popular. Investment is not popular. Everyone wants very quick, let's get rid of cages. 1,000
free range, cage free, whatever the heck that is. Yeah.
And here is like 1,000 points of pleasure that chickens now extra have, or whatever. It's like a very immediate calculatable number. One is interested in like long-term work that actually works. So because of that, I actually have a very hard time funding what I do. But the way I look at it is like, I get this done or die trying. There is no like nothing in between. And I personally see all these problems as something that can slow me down, but they can't stop me. And I think that's a point of view that all of us can like incorporate to what we do. But I just want to end by saying that please speak up. Please know that you have a power, an immense power to change your surrounding. Think about the snowball effect. Every vegan that you make is going to change the world. And activism comes in very, many different forms. You can donate your money, you can donate your time, you can go volunteer. In vegan hacktivists, you can actually donate your skills. If you're a graphic designer, you just want to help another activist, you can do that. But whatever you do, please just speak up.
Yep, we need to be active, because just living as a vegan, I think, means being active and speaking out against any form of injustice. So yes, that was, I will allow that answer, that non-answer to my question. But I think we can envision that world where the professional space is filled with animal advocates. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Harsini. I appreciate your time, and thank you for all that you do.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I'm here if anyone needs any help. If there's anything I can do, I'm here.
Clearly, there is no shortage of wise words and compelling arguments from Dr. Harsini. And honestly, I'm not surprised. It is important that we as a movement are constructively critical of our approach. We need to reevaluate our tactics, our strategies, and take in constructive criticism so we can get better, smarter, and more effective for the animals. That's why the work that he's doing with Allied Scholars for Animal Protection is so valuable. Imagine the change we can see when preparing future scientists, doctors, engineers, lawmakers, political leaders who all care about the animals. The scale of change that we will see is going to be remarkable, and that's why the work that ASAP is doing is key. So if you are a student or a future college student who is inspired by the work that Dr. Harsini is doing, be sure to follow him and ASAP. We will link all the information in our show notes. Please take a quick minute to rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people that find it, the more people can be inspired by the guests we have on our show and turn that into actionable change for the animals. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. Our channel has educational workshops, talks, and so much inspiring and informative content that you do not want to miss out on. At AAM, it's important to us to offer our content and resources for free so that it is accessible to everybody. If you like the podcast and all that AAM has to offer and are able to support us, please consider a one-time donation or becoming a monthly patron. It helps keep us going. To make a donation, you can use our link tree, which you can find in our show notes. You can also keep up with AAM on social media, visit our bookshop, our merch store, and keep up with all the fun things that we have going on. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help and guide you through your activism journey. Just go to our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. So if you needed a sign that you should be an activist for the animals, here you go. Now remember that it will take all of us to come together and collaborate to achieve animal liberation. So stay focused, be courageous, be perseverant, and keep doing your part. And most importantly, take care of yourselves. Until next time.